This morning, I'm very privileged. I feel very privileged to have Dr. H.C. Wilson with us and his wife, Debbie. We've enjoyed some great fellowship this weekend, really have, and really appreciate it. Dr. Wilson and I go back a little ways. I should tell you this, the night that I gave my heart to the Lord, back in 1979, he was 75 then. And so, no. In 1970, I'm going to pay for that. So in 1979, I was 16 years old, May 20th, 1979, Mount Allison University. As a 16-year-old, I was invited to give my heart to the Lord, and Dr. Wilson was the speaker that night, and a long time ago. And both of us are from the Atlantic area, Atlantic District, New Brunswick. And so over the years, I've had the privilege of sitting under his teaching and being able to experience his influence across our denomination. And he has served as pastor and his author. He's been district superintendent a couple of times. He's one of our general superintendents at one time. And I'm not sure what part of the world he was responsible for that time. I hope that world's still in peace. And it's just, and I mean this without going over the top, it's an honor and a privilege to have him here this morning and to be able to introduce him to you as my family, for you to experience his ministry and just to share this opportunity with him. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Wilson, come and share what the Lord has laid on your heart today, and don't say anything about me. All right.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to be here. When people like this lad go out on dangerous ground, I'm just debating how much I want to tell you that I know. But I'm glad. Tom and Pearl, are you here? No? Okay. We have friends from Burlington who were coming up to be here this morning. They've been friends of my wife for about, 100 years or so. So obviously they're not here, but I wanted to check so she'd put her mind at ease. So now she's going to find out what ditch they're in. So I'm kidding, partly. I want to thank you, those of you who didn't even know who I was going to be here, but thank you for all the kindness that has been shown to us. We've enjoyed very much the fine accommodation we have, had the opportunity to meet with some leaders yesterday morning, went to see Annie last night. That's a high-class piece of work. And so we really enjoyed that. The little gal that plays the part, how can you be that small and that young and that talented? That's amazing to me, really. So we enjoyed that very, very much. I've never been to your city before. This is a beautiful place. I'm a Canadian. I'm from New Brunswick. You know where that is, just before the world ends over there. And but I've never been here before. We've enjoyed it very, very much. And happy to be with your pastor, in spite of what he said. He's not a bad lad, really. And all the jobs, he talked about the jobs I had, that's because I couldn't hold a job. And so I kind of rotated around to this and that and other kinds of things. But it's been great to be here. And you have a wonderful building here that's been well designed. Well, you sort of borrowed it from somebody else or bought it. But this is a wonderful little place to serve the Lord. And I'm so glad to see the people who are here, and the change that has come about here in the last 7 or 8 years is just rather significant. So we thank God for all that has happened, and how you keep the building, which I assume must be you, or maybe you order people to do it. But the place looks really, really good. I've been in a lot of churches, and I won't bore you with all the war stories I could tell, but they're not all well maintained. And so this is really good. There was one of the ancient church leaders way back hundreds of years ago named Teresa of Avila, and she said something that applies to how I feel this morning. She said, what a great favor God does to those he places in the company of good people. And I'm happy to be here. The place actually feels healthy. You know, I read some time ago the Japanese people eat little fat but suffer fewer heart attacks than the British or the Americans. The French, on the other hand, eat a lot of fat. They also suffer fewer heart attacks than the British or the Americans. The Italians, they drink a lot of wine. They also suffer fewer heart attacks than the British or the Americans. What's the point? Eat and drink what you like is speaking English that kills you. But that's all I have to offer this morning. So we'll stand now for the dismissal. Oh, I'm kidding. The never-ending drama that was the life of the Apostle Paul was relentlessly unfolding as his ministry moved ever closer to its conclusion. He was arrested by the Roman governor, whose name was Felix, after the high priest from Caesarea showed up with his lawyer, whose name was Tertullus, and brought charges against Paul, saying, "We have found this man time and time again disturbing the peace, stirring up riots against the Jews all over the world, the ringleader of the sect called the Nazarenes. He's a real bad apple, I must say. We caught him trying to defile our holy temple." So Paul was arrested, put under relative relaxed house arrest for a couple of years, after which Felix, the guy who arrested him, was replaced by another governor by the name of Porcius Festus. And the new governor summoned Paul to come and visit with him, have a meeting with him, and he wanted to hear his story. And in that encounter, Paul appealed as a Roman citizen to trial by Caesar in Rome. And so he left on a trip to Italy. He wrote about that they were under the command of a Roman centurion named Julius, who had 100 soldiers under him, and they were traveling with 176 other people in a vessel, 276 people on it. The onward trip was slow. They faced dangers along the way. They stopped at a couple of places to overnight and set out finally to try to get to a place called Phoenix on the island of Crete. But they were overcome. They set out gently, but ran into a fierce storm on the process. Trying to save the vessel, they threw all the cargo overboard. Then they trussed up the ship with ropes underneath to keep her from breaking up in the storm, and Paul gave them a little pep talk under the topic of do not lose courage. The storm lasted a couple of weeks, finally began to abate. The ship was blown into shallow water. The crew dropped anchors off the stern, but the wind drove her toward a sandbar, and they knew she was going to run ashore. They didn't have any idea where they were. She was blown up onto a sandbar, and the soldiers proposed to execute all 276 people to keep her from escaping. The captain wouldn't permit it, and they were all set free, and everybody abandoned ship. Everybody got to shore safely. No lives were lost, and they found themselves soggy and shaken on the shore of a strange and unknown place and didn't know where they were. Now, why take 2 minutes to give you all that detail? Just to entice you to say the Bible is an interesting book. Everything I just read in it, every detail and more are in the story we're going to talk about this morning. So if you think the Bible is a boring book, wake up and smell the roses. There's a lot of wonderful things to say there and some interesting reading. I've paid for novels that had less drama in them than what I just told you about. So they landed, and this is what happened when they landed. It's Acts chapter 28. Once safely on shore, we found out we were on the island called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire, and they welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. Malta's an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, as I'm sure you know. The Romans dominated it clear back to 200 AD, and the official history of the island of Malta says this. In AD 60, the islands were visited by St. Paul, who was said to have been shipwrecked on the shores of the aptly named St. Paul's Bay. So there they were, on the beach of St. Paul's Bay, safe and sound, but soggy and shaken. And where did they find themselves, these people, these 276? They were in desperate circumstances, not of their choosing. Ever been there? They were in a real life situation beyond their control. Ever been there? They were in unfamiliar surroundings and wondering how they would ever be received. Ever been there? They were in need of help from people they did not even know, and they were in confusion, wondering what next? Where do we go from here? As followers of Jesus Christ, ladies and gentlemen, we will encounter people in the ministry of our church that are just like the shipwrecked 276 people on the beach at St. Paul's Bay, not suffering from a literal shipwreck, but suffering from lives that are facing incredible challenges and major disruptions. I need me water. Wise is the preacher who knows when he's dry I've met some and listened to some and never did get that figured out. We're all good. Everybody still here? So when the church is working, ladies and gentlemen, just like this one, new people, I don't want to get wandering off here too much, but I was very impressed this morning watching people come into church. Just about every generation was here, the young, the very, very, very young, and some people who haven't been young since they had electric lights. And you have this whole range of people here, the young and the old and the in-between. And it's strikingly impressive to me, because sometimes you go to a church and everybody there looks older than me. That's a scary idea. So thank you for being who you are. And thank you for coming from where you ever came from to be in this environment. I'm glad that you're here. Did I lose my place on my notes? No, I did not. So churches that are functioning like New Testament churches will encounter people whose realities in their life are very much like the 276 people who landed at Malta that morning, suffering from circumstances they did not control or did not appreciate particularly. But there they were, because you see, we're going to talk a little while about the islanders who showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. I'm going to have 3 major points this morning. Do you ever wonder why sermons have 3 points? If you go to take homiletics somewhere, we're supposed to teach you how to preach. 3 points. I've heard sermons that didn't have any point at all, and I'm hoping this is not one of them. Consider this, ladies and gentlemen, these people at Malta, they welcomed strangers, they did not shun them. They welcomed strangers, they did not shun them. There's great awkwardness when you go into a place where you've never been before trying to find your way around. You ever go to a strange church you've never been? And you just kind of wondered. I've actually gone to places where when I stepped into the lobby, I wondered if I had a cancerous disease or leprosy perhaps, or I'd forgotten to shower that morning and I was personally offensive, or some way you just kind of, didn't happen here. But people, they welcomed strangers, they did not shun them, they showed them unusual kindness. When I was district superintendent down east, we had a ministerial in a hotel, in the Delta Hotel in St. John one time, and about 150 pastors and their spouses were there. And we had a missionary who was coming to bring remarks to us, who had been serving in Colombia. Everybody knew he was coming, but he was not a known entity. And when we come into the hotel, we had to walk through the lobby to get into the meeting room. There was a homeless person sitting there, shabbily dressed, unkept, just sitting there. Sad to say, everybody in our group walked right on by this person. Turned out he was the missionary from Colombia. He had dressed like that on purpose to find out whether or not the environment he was in was going to show unusual kindness and welcome him there. They learned a lesson that morning, so did I, right? And I know you are already great at practicing welcome. I served on a board of the denomination, but way back somewhere. And a gentleman on the board was named George Walquist. He came from Iowa. I'd never met him till then, but he'd been on the board for many, many years, and he knew everybody in the room, and I didn't know anybody in the room. George became a hero to me because he took me around and introduced me to the others who were part of the group, and it just warmed my heart. Unusual kindness. So my very interesting early word to you would be, ladies and gentlemen, continue to do what you're doing, but show unusual kindness. The people at Malta, they showed unusual kindness in face of a tough situation. It would have been easier to stay home where it was warm, but they didn't. They showed unusual kindness that was not controlled by the unpleasant circumstance, but rather by the principle of responding to an obvious need, something our friends missed at the Delta Hotel. They showed unusual kindness without any hope or any promise of receiving any benefit back to them in any way from that kindness. It just was the right thing to do. They showed unusual kindness to people who in all likelihood didn't speak their language or understand their customs, but they needed help. And so one of my simple hopes for all of the people who are a part of any church that believes in Jesus Christ is that we will be people of the UK. No, I don't mean the United Kingdom, where your pastor's wife came from, although I'm not opposed to that. But I'd like us all to be part of the UK group, which is the people of unusual kindness. It's just amazing how a little bit can make a huge difference. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not our job to make people holy, but it is our job to make them welcome. Unusual kindness. They welcomed strangers. Then they withstood the situation. They didn't surrender to it. The Bible says it was raining and cold. Not a very nice day when these guys were stuck down on the beach. And in many ways, our culture is raining and cold. We'd love to live in a culture that was more Christocentric, more pointed toward things in which we believe, but that's not the case. For 7 years of my ministerial life, I lived in the state of Alabama, where I was a district superintendent down there. And you understand, Alabama is the buckle on the Bible Belt. I mean, you're right in the heart of Dixie. But our children went to public school there, and on Wednesdays, no homework was given out because it was prayer meeting night at church. I'm talking about public schools, right? And the culture was warm. One of the most respected people in the community was, quote unquote, the preacher, was the term that was used. But you understand we have moved far away from that in our culture. I'm a Canadian, proud to be one, have always been, will always be. Which parenthetic, if you're timing this next minute doesn't count. Debbie and I took a little journey down through the U.S. on the way up here to visit the Leaves in New Hampshire and Vermont. When we crossed the border back into Canada in Niagara Falls the day before yesterday, the 6 or 7 cars in front of us were all from various states of the U.S. So this gal, who was very courteous with us, she was accustomed to answering them all the standard questions. When we rolled up and gave her her passports, "Where are you coming from?" we told her, and she said, "How long do you intend to be in Canada?" I said, "The rest of my life, actually." She'd been asking all those others who were saying a week or 2 weeks or something. "I'm going to stay there forever, thank you very much. That's my plan." So we were a little surprised by it, but we're in a culture that is not friendly to us, you know. And today, whatever position you hold on this, Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated last week, is going to be buried today, this very day. A man who may have been rash in the things he said in some ways, but he died for believing things that we believe, shot in the neck. 100,000 people are going to gather today in Arizona at his funeral because our culture is raining and cold. You understand? Kind of scary days. It's wonderful to be alive. It's the days that God gave us, but they're not common sunny. They're days, but common sunny days don't require rescue. The days that are raining and cold call for it. Not for hiding or sleeping or waiting for a better time, but to get on with it. And our job is not to lament the weather, not to complain about the cold days we have, but it is our job to raise an umbrella and provide a raincoat to help people avoid the drizzle of discouragement and the acid rain of criticism. So they withstood the situation. They didn't surrender to it. And the third one of these is they warmed their surroundings. They didn't sour them. They built a fire. They built a fire. There's a slight little bit of pyromania in all of us. I think the sound of a fire truck gets your attention. It just does, and you can't resist wondering, where are they going? And you're very relieved when they roll right past your house. That's nice. And who among us never once in their life said, "When I grow up, I want to be a firefighter"? There's just something about it. And history is dotted with fires of horrendous damage. You know about some of these things. The greatest one, or one of them, 1906, the Great Fire in San Francisco, spawned by an earthquake on April the 18th, destroyed over 28,000 buildings and killed over 3,000 people and left more than 50% of the city homeless. But one of the people who was affected by this horrendous fire was a merchant who, in that era in Chicago where this occurred, many people had a small business on the ground floor and they lived above in an apartment with their family, which is the case of this man. And the next day after the fire, historians tell us, he was found out next to the road holding up a sign, this man was, with ashes and destruction all around him, and the sign said, "Everything lost except wife, children, and hope. Business will resume as usual as soon as possible." And when life comes along and sets something on fire around us, it is great that we can reach out with the kind of faith that reaches for something better. And I have a deep passion, ladies and gentlemen, to see fire in churches just like this one, but not the varieties that leave horrendous damage amidst the smoke and ruins. I was in a church one time. You know, sometimes weird stuff happens in church. You don't notice that? Some of you are thinking it's happening now. The treasurer got up to give his annual report. When he was done, some old weasel in the congregation spoke up. I wouldn't tell you his name for less than $100. Spoke up and said as nasty as he could, "I thought we raised more money than that last year. Been wondering where you got your new car." That man closed the books, walked out of the church, and never came back through the door until he was carried in it in a box 20 years later. Somebody started a wildfire. There's nobody here would do that, but if you're ever tempted to do it, swallow the temptation. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You know, I've been in the church my whole life, like I'm 117 years old. And I've been around the church my whole life, and there's so many wonderful stories I could tell you, great things that happen, but weird stuff happens. Another story, I don't know why this is on my mind, but I'm leaving today. If you don't like it, you won't see me again, so it'll all be good. When I was DS, this was a church in the state of Maine, I was asked to go down and referee a fight. Kind of like. Two men in the church, two old bulls that couldn't get along, and they both thought they were right and the other guy was wrong. If it hadn't been disastrous, it was funny. But when it was done, the crowning moment of the whole thing, which was a terrible moment, it was obvious that the shift was going toward one man and away from the other. So the guy who was losing this whole thing as we worked our way through it stood up, looked at the other guy and said, "I'll see you in hell when I'm walking past," and went out. Well, he wasn't a very nice person. All I'm saying is, when we're inside a fellowship, it's a great idea to keep ourselves focused on the things that really matter. We're going to show unusual kindness. We're going to shield people from the storms, and we're not going to start fires of horrendous damage. But we are going to be people who light fires of hope in the dark. You're already doing that here. It's obvious with the cross-generational population that you have here and the crowded facilities. You're going to have to do something about that pretty soon. But you're obviously raising fires of hope in the dark. I know that's true. I could hear the hubbub, if you want to call it, the open and warm conversation between people in the lobby this morning. I was impressed. If I lived here, I'd come to church here if you'd let me. Man, if I could find a seat. Fires of hope in the dark. You know, that's where lighthouses came from. That was the reason for them. In the early Roman Empire, they lit fires on the headlands, and stone towers were erected for that purpose. It often required near heroic effort to keep the fires burning, especially when it was raining and cold. But much was at stake. The Pharos, Pharos, the Pharos Lighthouse in Alexandria, Egypt, was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and it was the height of an approximately 40-story building in today's time and culture. It's no longer there. One of those 7 wonders of the ancient world. It has long since been destroyed or demolished in one way or another, but I have stood on the very spot where it stood in Alexandria and wondered how many people coming ashore there with their vessels, their lives have been saved and their journey have been rescued because somebody was up on top of that lighthouse lighting a light of hope in the dark. Debbie and I have been married 2.5 years, so this story's not about her. We were both married before. We're weird. We're just confessing that to you. Her husband was my best friend, and my wife was her best friend. They died and went to heaven, and we're what's left over. That's pretty much it. But the first time around, I got married in 1910. I'm just trying to go along with his idea how old I am. Was actually married in 1965. And we were living in Moncton, and my mother lived in Fredericton, a 2-hour drive away, something like that. And we were going home for Christmas. Who does not want to go home for Christmas? But it was snowing hard, near blizzard conditions, and you got after a while where you couldn't even see the road in front of you. Coming up the side of the St. John River near a place called Majorville, and I was tempted, considering getting out and going and knocking on the door of a house, any house along there, to see if we could seek refuge from the storm. But I didn't want refuge from the storm. I wanted to go home. So one of these snub-nosed 18-wheelers came by, not the ones that are built up snub on the front. And he went by me, not going very fast, blew his air horn as he went by, and I said to Gloria, my wife, I'm going to follow that guy. He can see what I can't see. And if he goes in the St. John River, we're going with him. But I'm going to follow that guy to see what happens. And I did, and he actually went over to Marysville, the area where my mother lived, and went by a street where the bridge goes across the river, not more than 1 kilometer from my mother's house, and he went on by. I went around the corner, and there it was. My mother's little, humble, brick, semi-detached home. There it was. Nothing grand about it, but it was home, and it wasn't a home fire in the literal sense, but there was warmth and welcome and comfort from the cold, and there was hope in the dark there. Spotlight is that kind of place. And you need to refine that to the very best of your continued ability so that people who come to this place say, there's a welcome there, there's warmth there, there's comfort there, there's hope in the dark there. This is not a sentiment, ladies and gentlemen, and syrupy feelings is not about that. It's about environments of genuine warmth and acceptance and sustenance and open arms. It's about hope in the dark. And the New Testament church is a safe place. The signal fires in the New Testament church says there's hope and help freely dispensed in this place. And I haven't been here before, but I've been around a lot of churches, and I'm not stupid yet. It's not fully. There's a caring congregation in this place. There's a dedicated pastor and spouse in this place. There are fully devoted followers of Christ in this place. There are fellow sojourners in the adventure of life here. And what you're saying about your congregational life is that there's life and hope in this place. So your friends ought to come here. You don't need to be ashamed about inviting them. This is a good place to be. And there are signal fires, if I can use that term, that you'll sense when you're working through your community and where you work and where you live and where you farm or whatever else you do. People who are lost often light a fire. People who are facing wolves in the night, they light a fire. People who are trying to attract the attention of those who could bring them help often light a fire. And people who need a change in their circumstances light a fire, not literal fires, you understand, but there are people in this community who are needing help, and they'll be lighting fires. You'll pick it up in their behavior. You'll pick it up in their comments. You'll pick it up in their observations. It's not about grabbing them by the throat and throwing them on the ground, saying, if you die this minute, you're going to hell. It's not that kind of stuff. It's just being aware of things that are around you, because it is our job to smother fires that result in damage. It is also our job to build fires of hope in the dark. So I'm hoping that as a congregation you will provide or continue to provide unusual kindness, unfolded umbrellas, shielding people in the fire, unexpected generosity, uncondemning open arms, no sense of guilt, uncondemning open arms that tap into the truth of the old gospel song that says, down in the human heart, crushed by the tempter, feelings lie buried that grace can restore, touched by a loving heart and wakened by kindness, chords that are broken will vibrate once more. Uncondemning open arms. Undeserved grace. Who among us has never needed grace and received it? Grace is undeserved, you understand? It's undeserved. A favor that you receive from God, not because you're anything special, just because you are. Amazing grace. I was driving home one time, and I lived in Alabama, going from Louisiana over, driving slightly in excess of the posted speed limit on a 2-lane road, and I met a Louisiana state trooper going the opposite direction. I could see him up there coming toward me. And when he was, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 car lengths away, the lights on top of his vehicle came on. I looked in the mirror. I'm optimistic. I looked in the mirror and thought, who is it behind me he's interested in? Or is there a wreck down the road that I can't see? And that was not it. So, of course, you understand when that happens to your body functions for failure. They fail you. Your hands become sweaty. Your mouth becomes dry. You're not sure what to do. So I immediately put on my signal light. I'm going to be very law-abiding now. Put on my signal light and slid over toward the shoulder of the road and slowed down. And so did he. And he came by me close enough that I could look out my window and see him closer, sir, than I am to you. I mean, he was just right there with his window. He just smiled and flipped off his lights and drove away. Grace. I don't know who he was. If I'd have known who he was, I'd have sent flowers to his wife. But he had me dead to rights. He could have fined me. He could have taken points away from me. I don't know what all he could have done, but I was not doing the right thing. And instead of coming down on me like I was some delinquent, which I guess I was, he extended grace to me, undeserving grace. So, ladies and gentlemen, it would be my hope that you'll be a crowd that'll light hope, that you'll continue to light fires of hope in the dark. And if you should be tempted, any of you should be tempted or inclined to strike a match of gossip, not grace, or of judgment, not mercy, or to strike a match that causes horrendous damage or high drama, frankly, I hope you burn your fingers. When a church does, here's the thing, see, when a church does all it can do, then the Holy Spirit does what he can do. There are things we like to see in the life of church. We can't make them happen, but we can do what we can do, and then the Holy Spirit will do what he cannot do. And I'm going to be done with this. I'm borrowing something that you may have heard this before. This was first spoken in the United Methodist District Conference in Memphis, Tennessee in 2020 by a United Methodist pastor there. And this, I hope, will encourage you. He said, when God sends forth his Spirit, amazing things can happen. Barriers are broken, communities are formed, opposites are reconciled, unity is established, disease is cured, addiction is broken, cities are renewed, races are reconciled, hope is established, and people are blessed. So, ladies and gentlemen, get ready. God's up to something, and he's up to something here, pretty clear. So, discouraged folks, cheer up. Dishonest folks, fess up. Sour folks, sweeten up. Closed folks, open up. Gossips, shut up. Conflicted folks, make up. Sleeping folks, wake up. Lukewarm folk, fire up. Dry bones, shake up. And pew potatoes, stir up. Simple, I know. But the matter of moving a church forward from where it is to where you want it to be involves simple things. People committed to Christ doing the best they can. So I'm going to pray for you in just a minute. Then we'll turn it back to the pastor, do whatever it is he wants to do. But my spirit tells me that this place is full of people who actually want to see this become more than what it is, and it's great what it is, but to move it forward, right? You're crowded. I'm so glad you're crowded in here. That's really good, but it's really bad. All at the same time. So who knows what's ahead? You may love it all and you may not love it all, but ladies and gentlemen, there's a great future for you here. The present you have has been built on the past that needed to be built upon, and God is at work. So welcome people, don't shun them. Never mind the raining and cold. Change the circumstances, right? And light a fire of hope. There goes the new baby. How old? 3 weeks. Everybody under a month old is free to leave now. The rest of you, that's just a little too soon to go. So I want to pray for you. And if your heart is in tune with this, I'm not going to ask you to stand up and dance a jig or anything. But if your heart is in tune with the general thrust of what I'm saying, could I see your hand saying, "Preacher, you know, we're pretty much with you. This is good." Father dear, we thank you for the joy of being in this place. Thank you for what has been occurring here across the years with the leadership of the pastor under the blessing of the Holy Spirit. And I thank you for this congregation and their warmth and their looking forward with anticipation to the future. I pray you'll keep your hand upon them for good, defeat the power of Satan that would come against them. And may they be, in fact, a continuing spotlight in this community. I pray in Christ's name. Amen.